بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of Risalat al-Wilayah. Today we start with chapter 4, which is considered to be the most important chapter of the book. The title of this chapter is في أن الطريق إلى هذا الكمال بعد إمكانه ما هو. There is possibility of reaching perfection, and we mentioned that how we can reach the point of shuhud or ru'ya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the mystical sense. Now the question is, what's the way, what's the method, the path for reaching this perfection? So it's a very important part of the book. Like previous chapters, Allama starts first with a kind of intellectual argument, burhan aqli, and then supports that with Qur'an and hadith. This part is also very difficult, the intellectual discussion here in chapter 4 is very difficult. So I thought maybe we start first with Qur'an and hadith and come back later to the intellectual discussion. So if we go forward to page 59, just before tatemma, he says that هذا البرهان من مواهب الله سبحانه. This argument is one of the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-mukhtassat bihadhihi al-risalah, which is exclusive to this essay, this book. Walhamdulillah, all the praise is due to Allah. So this is something that Allama has been gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he shares with us in this chapter. He says the result of the burhan, of the argument which has been mentioned, the beginning of this chapter, is أن شهود هذه الحقائق ومعرفتها منطوية في شهود النفس ومعرفتها. To witness these realities and know them, these حقائق, truths, depends on witnessing our own nafs. Ma'rifatun nafs is the key for reaching these haqa'iq. فأقرب طرق الإنسان إليها طريق معرفة النفس. The nearest path for reaching these haqa'iq is the path of ma'rifatun nafs, self-knowledge. وقد تحصل أيضا سابقا أن ذلك بالإعراض عن غير الله والتوجه إلى الله. And we said before that the way to reach ma'rifatun nafs is to turn away from anything other than Allah and be focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, turn our face towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the result of the intellectual argument in this chapter, and inshallah, as I said, we will go back to it later. But I think the idea is not difficult by itself, and therefore we can now go to the discussion based on the Qur'an and Sunnah. تتمة إذا تتبعنا الكتاب والسنة. If we make a survey of the Qur'an and Sunnah, وتأملنا فيها تأملا وافيا, and reflect in an adequate way on the Qur'an and Sunnah, وجدنا أن المدار في الثواب والعقاب هو الإطاعة والإنقياد والتمرد والعناد. The criterion for reward and punishment is what? Obedience on the one hand or disobedience on the other hand. So criterion for thawab is al-ita'atu wal-inqiyad, and criterion for iqab is tamarrud wal-inad. Tamarrud means to refuse to listen, to obey. It's like disobedience. Inad means hostility. فمن المسلم المحصل منهما أن المعاصي حتى الكبائر الموبقة لا توجب عقابا إذا صدرت ممن لا يشعر بها أو من يجري مجراه. Because the criterion for thawab and iqab is ta'an, disobedience. So if someone does something which is haram, but not knowingly, not intentionally, so he didn't want to disobey, this person is not going to be punished. So Allama says, based on what we said, that madar, mi'yar, milak, whatever you call it, in thawab and iqab is al-ita'atu wal-tamarrud, al-ita'atu wal-ma'siyah, famin al-musallam. So from those things that are accepted by all, which are resulting from this, is that ma'asi, sins, even al-kabair, even major ones, al-mubaqa, which are destructive, لا توجب عقابا إذا صدرت ممن لا يشعر بها means بالمعصية. If this sin happens from someone who is not aware or conscious, he's not deliberately doing this, or something like that, man yajri majra, for example, a child, for example, وأن الطاعات لا يوجب ثوابا or لا توجب ثوابا إذا صدرت من غير تقرب وانقياد. On the other hand, ta'a also needs niyyah. If someone does ta'at, acts of obedience, without niyyah of taqarrub, it's not going to work. It's not going to be entitled for thawab. أن الطاعات لا يوجب ثوابا إذا صدرت من غير تقرب وانقياد. Ta'at are not going to cause reward if they happen without niyyah of getting nearer to Allah. Yes, there are some akhlaqi, ethical or moral qualities that they are certainly pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In them you don't need to do qasd taqarrub as a virtue, as a quality, because qasd taqarrub is normally for actions. إلا إذا كانت مما الانقياد ملازم لذاته, unless this thing that has happened without qasd taqarrub, so this person has not consciously, deliberately done qasd taqarrub, but this is a good quality or something that we know is good, and whoever has this is a good person and is trying to be a good person, is trying to be obedient. إلا إذا كانت مما الانقياد ملازم لذاته, unless it is one of those things that انقياد come as a kind of mulazim, as a implication, as a requirement. كبعض الأخلاق الفاضلة الشريفة, like some of the traits of character. If you are generous, for example, if you are honest and sincere, this is accepted by Allah, this is good for you, and you don't need to here make niyyah of taqarrub. The quality is lovable. وكذلك صدور المعصية ممن لا يشعر بكونه معصية إذا قصد الإطاعة لا يخلو من حسن. Also then Allah refers to the issue that we call in Ilm al-Usul the issue of tajarri. Suppose someone does a sinful action, but he doesn't know that it's a sinful action. Actually, he wants to do something good. He wants to do something good, something which is act of obedience, but mistakenly he does something bad. We cannot say this is similar to someone who has done something bad right away. No, this person wanted to do something good. So at least for his niyyah, there is something good. وكذلك صدور المعصية ممن لا يشعر بكونه معصية إذا قصد الإطاعة لا يخلو من حسن. So if ma'asiyah happens from someone that is not conscious or aware that it is ma'asiyah, when he makes the niyyah of ta'ah, it's not empty or void from goodness. So there is some goodness, at least the niyyah is good. وصدور الطاعة بقصد العناد واللعب لا يخلو من. Suppose someone does something that it is act of obedience, but the niyyah of him was not act of obedience. He did it thinking that this is bad and he wanted to be hostile, or he wanted to make it as a game or play, but it happened to be a good thing. We cannot say that this is empty from badness because it happened that it is a good thing. So niyyah is very important. وكذلك مراتب الطاعة والمعصية تختلف حسب اختلاف الانقياد والتمرد اللذين تشتمل عليهما. So the degrees, so whether it is ta'ah or ma'asiyah, and to what extent it's ta'ah or ma'asiyah, is it shadid, is it khafif, is it strong, is it weak, depends on how much inqiyad or tamarrud are there, how much inqiyad means to be listening, obedient. Tamarrud means to refuse to be disobedient. We have hadith, أفضل الأعمال أحمدها, the most privileged or the best of the actions are those that are more difficult. And we have lots of hadiths in different sections about ta'at and ma'asi that suggest that there are differences and degrees in actions. ورد متواترا في متفرقات أبواب الطاعات والمعاصي اختلاف is fa'il for ورد. So in a mutawatir way, in miscellaneous sections of ta'at and ma'asi, for example about salat, fasting, hajj, etc., or scenes, what can be understood in a tawatur means many narrators in different generations have mentioned it. Sometimes tawatur is lafzi, sometimes ma'nawi. Lafzi means the same wording is repeated. Ma'nawi means the idea, even if it is with a different wording. Here we have tawatur that maratib of a'mal are different with respect to fadlan wa khissatan. Fadl means about their goodness and being virtuous. Khissa means to be mean, to be low. Or reward and punishment of a'mal are different. Something can be rewarded less, something can be the same, maybe type of action. Salat can be rewarded in many different degrees. وَالْعَقْلُ السَّلِيمُ أَيْضًا حَاكِمٌ بِذَلِكَ. Sound reason also makes the same judgment that actions are different. وَأَكْثَرُ الْآيَاتِ الْقُرْآنِيَّةِ تُحِيلُ النَّاسِ إِلَى مَا يَحْكُمُ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ. Most of Quranic verses refer people to the judgment of aql. So don't be surprised. This is why in Usul al-Fiqh we have lots of discussions which are aqli. وَالْمِيزَانِ بِنَاءً عَلَى حُكْمِ الْعَقْلِ. So what is the measure, what is the criterion based on the hukm of aql, judgment of aql or ruling of aql is this. الانقياد للحق, or for the opposite والعناد للحق. This supports also the idea that we had before, you remember, in Akhlaq of Hose and also in the series Indicators of Piety and some other places. We have argued that truthfulness is the main thing. Everything in the end of the day goes back to truthfulness when it comes to positive or virtuous things. This is also in line with that. Mizan bina'an ala hukm al-aql is what? Al-inqiyadu lil-haq. Or for the opposite, al-inadu lil-haq. Nothing else. وهذان أمران مختلفان بحسب المراتب بالضرورة. So it is ضروري, it is بديهي that انقياد للحق or enmity towards haq have different degrees. Someone is very obedient to haq, sometimes a person is less obedient. Sometimes people quickly accept haq, sometimes people take time to accept, sometimes people don't accept, sometimes people fight. So there are different degrees. وحيث إن السعادة والشقاوة تدوران مدارهما فلهما أرض عريض بحسب المراتب الموجودة من الانقياد والتمرد. Felicity, sa'ada, happiness, or opposite to it, shaqawa, being unfortunate, or having misfortune and misery, in life depend on ta'ah and inad. Therefore, based on how much ta'ah, how much inqiyad, how much obedience is there, or how much tamarrud and disobedience is there, the degrees or ranks would be decided. So sa'adah depends on inqiyad, and someone who has more inqiyad has more sa'adah. وَمِنْ هُنَا يَظْهَرُ أَنَّ الْمُخْتَصَّ. Please listen very carefully to this. أَنَّ الْمُخْتَصَّ مِنَ السَّعَادَةِ بِالْمُنْتَحِلِ بِالدِّينِ الْحَقِّ أَنَّمَا هُوَ كَمَالُهَا. What is exclusive from happiness to the person who adheres to the religion of the truth? You remember in discussions in Wings of Unity, some other places we have said that this is Deenul Haq. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق, not الدين الحق. Deen al-Haq is opposite to Deen al-Batil, religion of the truth, because our religion is to surrender to the absolute truth. So if someone is muntahil means adherent. If someone adheres to the religion of the truth, reaches sa'ad. But if someone doesn't adhere to Deenul Haq, is he deprived from sa'ad 100%? So means 0% he has? Allama says no. Other people can also have sa'adah, but kamalus sa'adah is for al-muntahilu bideen al-haq. ومن هنا يظهر أن المختص من السعادة بالمنتحل بدين الحق أنما هو كمالها. What is exclusive to the adherents of the religion of the truth from sa'adah means the type of sa'adah or the amount of sa'adah that is exclusive is kamalus sa'adah. Amma mutlaqus sa'adah, just to have sa'adah in general, not perfect sa'adah, not complete sa'adah. Some sa'adah فغير مختص بالمنتحل بدين الحق. It's not exclusive to the adherents of religion of the truth. بل ربما وجد في غير المنتحل أيضا. Maybe someone else also can have some sa'adah, some degrees of sa'adah. Depending on what? Depending on having some degrees of inqiyad. إذا وجد فيه شيء من الانقياد. So if he is truthful to some extent, but has not reached the best presentation of the truth, still he can have some degrees of sa'adah, depending on how obedient he is, how submissive he is. إذا وجد فيه شيء من الانقياد or فقد شيء من العناد. Either he has some degrees of obedience or has weaker and lesser degrees of hostility. So if someone is 100% hostile and the other person is 50% hostile, the difference is there. You cannot say they are all the same. So who has 50% is less bad. You can say it better, but better not that it is good and this is better. Means relatively speaking, this 100% is worse and this is better. هذا هو الذي يحكم به العقل. This is what aql makes in his judgment. This is the judgment of aql. This is the ruling of aql. Aql says everything has to be considered And even if there is a little bit more of obedience or a little bit less of hostility, it should be reflected in the sa'ada or shaqawa, in the reward or punishment. Even مثقال ذرة خيرا of difference should be there.
بحمدك يا إلهي بدأت قولي وجئتك خاضعا.
هذا هو الذي يحكم به العقل. Also ويظهر من الشرع, but the same thing can be also appearing from scriptures, from shara. فإنما الشرع يعين حدود ما حكم به العقل. Shar also is in harmony with aql and explains the borders and the limits of judgment of aql. For example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a famous hadith said, بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. I've been raised by Allah as a prophet to accomplish noble traits of character. If someone has some noble traits of character, wouldn't that be important? Wouldn't that count? وذلك كما ورد في كسرى و حاتم الطائي. Kasra, the king. Kasra, the king. So the Iranian king who was known as just, or Hatam al-Ta'i, a pagan who was known as generous, because of these qualities, they are not going to be punished, although they didn't have iman in religion of the truth. In Khisal of Sheikh Saduq, there is a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, from Imam Baqir, from Imam Zainul Abidin, finally from Imam Sadiq from Imam Baqir from Jaddihi, from Imam Hussein, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam from Amir al-Mu'mineen. قال إن للجنة ثمانية أبواب. Heaven truly has 8 gates. باب يدخل منه النبيون والصديقون. One gate is for the prophets and Siddiqun, the most truthful people. باب يدخل منه الشهداء والصالحون. So those 4 groups, أولئك مع الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والشهداء والصديقين والصالحين. So Nabiyyin and Siddiqeen go from one gate, Shuhada, martyrs or witnesses, and Salihun, righteous people, go from another gate. وخمسة أبواب يدخل منها شيعتنا ومحبونا. And there are 5 gates from which our Shia and lovers of us will enter from. فلا أزال واقفا على الصراط أدعو وأقول. And I will be standing on the Sirat and would be praying and saying, رب سلم شيعتي ومحبي وأنصاري وأوليائي ومن تولاني في دار الدنيا. Oh, my Lord, please save my Shia and my lovers and helpers and those who have my Wilayah and whoever has adopted my Wilayah in dunya. فإذا النداء من بطنان العرش. Then a call will be made from Arsh, from the maybe central position of Arsh. قد أجبت دعوتك. I accepted your dua. وشفعتك وشفعت or شفعت. شفعتك means شفعت. I made you shafi' in your Shia. It means you can do shafa'a for them, you can intercede for them. Then ويشفع كل رجل من شيعتي ومن تولاني ونصرني وحارب من حاربني بفعل أو قول في 70 من جيرانه وأقربائه. I will make shafa'a for the Shia, but then every person from my Shia and who has my Wilayah and has helped me and has fought against those who have been fighting me with action or word, they can do shafa'a. They will do shafa'a for 70 of their neighbors and relatives. So this is 1 plus 1 plus 5, 7 gates. 1 remains. وباب يدخل منه سائر المسلمين ممن يشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولم يكن في قلبه مثقال ذرة من بغضنا أهل البيت. Other Muslimin, other believers also can go if they have no enmity. So it's not that only people who have the right aqidah, right madhab can go to heaven. Of course, you have to bring all the hadiths and verses and principles, but basically from this hadith what we can understand is that non-Shia also can go to heaven. وفي تفسير القمي and Dhuraith, in Tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim Qumi, there is a hadith from Imam Baqir alayhi salam. قلت له جعلت فداك ما حال الموحدين المقرين بنبوة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله من المذنبين الذين يموتون وليس لهم إمام ولا يعرفون ولايتكم. May I be your ransom. How is the condition and situation of monotheists who admit prophethood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They are Muslims, but they are sinful. They have some sins. They die without imam. They don't recognize your imam, your wilayah. What would be their situation? According to this hadith, Imam said, أما هؤلاء فإنهم في حفرهم لا يخرجون منها. They are in their own holes, would not come out. فمن كان له عمل صالح ولم يظهر منه عداوة فإنه يخد له خد إلى الجنة التي خلقها الله بالمغرب فيدخل عليه الروح إلى يوم القيامة حتى يلقى الله فيحاسبه بحسناته وسيئاته فإما إلى الجنة وإما إلى النار فهؤلاء المرجون لأمر الله. قال وكذلك يفعل بالمستضعفين والبله والأطفال وأولاد المسلمين الذين لم يبلغوا الحلم. وأما النصاب من أهل القبلة فإنه يخد لهم خد إلى النار التي خلقها الله في المشرق فيدخل عليهم اللهب والشرر والدخان وفورة الحميم إلى يوم القيامة ثم بعد ذلك مصيرهم إلى الحميم. Basically, Imam, according to this hadith, says it depends on whether they have enmity or not. If they have enmity, they are nawasib, nusab is nawasib. If they have enmity, even if they are min ahl al-qibla, they are Muslim, but they have enmity for their imam, for hujjah of Allah, they are hostile, they deliberately reject, so there would be a passage for them towards the east, and they would be presented to or subjected to fire and punishment, etc., till they go to the hell. But those that have amal salih, they have some good deeds, they have no adawa, they just have not reached, have not come to recognize the issue of imamah and wilayah. So for them, there would be a possibility of getting to Jannah, or at least a connection, a kind of passage access till the day of judgment. Then Allah would calculate to hisab of their hasanat and sayyi'at. They may go to heaven, they may go to, but there is a chance to go to heaven. Depends on how much hasanat they have, etc. These are the people that Qur'an says they are murjawna li amrillah. The same is with mustad'afin or al-bulah. Some people who have no good understanding, they have mental issues. Children, atfal, or children of Muslims. So children, all children means infants, babies, children, or children, awlad of Muslims who have not become mature. They can go to heaven. So in this hadith, the core is whether there is adawa or not. Okay, if we go to the forward. In Dua Kumail, you are all familiar with this passage. Again, you see the issue is the issue of inat, hostility. فَبِالْيَقِينَ أَقْطَعُ لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاض معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما. Had it not been that you have made this firm decision to punish jahidik, those who deny, and to make permanent in punishment in hell mu'anadik, those who are your enemies. Had it not been that you have made such a decision, such a judgment, decree, لَجَعَلْتَ النَّارَ كُلَّهَا بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا, you have made all the fire cool and safe. وَمَا كَانَتْ لِأَحَدٍ فِيهَا مَقَرًّا وَلَا مَقَامًا, no one then was going to be there. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين. But you have made this vow that you are going to fill it from kafirin, those who reject, and to permanently put their mu'anadin. So the issue of anad is very important. وأكثر الآيات القرآنية, most of the Quranic verses that give wa'id. Wa'id is threat, opposite to promise. Wa'ad and wa'id. most of the ayat Qur'ani that give threat or threatens is for those that قامت لهم البينة وتمت عليهم الحجة وتقيد الكفر بالجحود والعناد. So when the Quran warns about punishment of fire, it's not every non-believer. It's for those that bayana has been there for them, clear signs. Hujjah is complete, and their kufr is kufrul juhud. جحدوا بها واستيقنتها أنفسهم ظلما وعلوا وعناد. They have enmity. For example, Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. Not every non-Muslim or every, for example, non-believer. Or قال تعالى وليهلك من هلك عن بينة ويحيى من حي عن بينة. So there must be بينة إتمام حجة. If for someone حجة has not been yet complete, has not had access to the truth, this person is not going to be destroyed. وبالجملة, this is very important conclusion. فالميزان كل الميزان في السعادة كل الميزان في السعادة والشقاوة والثواب والعقاب هو السلامة القلب وصفاء النفس. The whole standard measure criterion for felicity or lacking felicity, for reward punishment, is how pure is your heart, how clean, how sound is your heart, your nafs. Safa means purity. Risalat of the Prophet is makarimul akhlaq. So this is the whole thing. Qala subhana, everything has to help with this. Even salat, fasting, everything is to reach here. Salat tanha anil fahsha wal munkar. Great part of fahsha and munkar is in heart. That's the root of all other problems. Fasting is la'allakum tattaqoon. Qur'an says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. This dua of Ibrahim. لا تخزني يوم يبعثون يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا. قال سبحانه يوم تبلى السرائر. On the day of judgment, those hidden qualities and hidden traits of character, and maybe also hidden action, but sarira is normally for sifat, for qualities, not for just actions. They can be asrar, but sarira is normally used for traits of character. وَجَمِيعُ الْمِلَلِ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ, all divine traditions, not only Islam, تروم في تربية الناس هذا المرام. They all aim at educating and training people in this way. And he says, هذا مسلم من سلائقها وما تندب إليها. This is very established from their different, attitudes or what they recommend. وهو الذي يراه الحكماء المتألهون من السابقين. Those philosophers who believed in God, but even before Islam, before Christianity, they had also this idea. Maybe Allama refers to people like Socrates and Aristotle. وَأَمَّا شَرِيعَةُ الْإِسْلَامِ فَأَمْرُهَا فِي ذَلِكَ أَوْضَحُ. When it comes to Islam, it's very clear, clearer than other divine traditions or philosophers who were believers. غير أنها كما مر في أواخر الفصل الثاني تدعو إلى كل سعادة ممكنة. The thing is that, as we mentioned in the last part of second chapter, towards the end of second chapter, Shariat Islami calls towards every possible sa'adah. إلا أن معرفة الرب من طريق النفس حيث كانت أقرب طريقا وأتم نتيجة فإتيانها لها أقوى وأوكد. Although in Sharia Islami, every possible way for Sa'ada, every possible type of Sa'ada is wanted and is called for, but knowing Allah through nafs, through ma'rifatun nafs, because it is the nearest path and has better results. Therefore, Sharia is coming to this point and emphasizing on this in a very strong way. وَلِذَلِكَ تَرَى الْكِتَابَ وَالسُّنَّةِ يقصدان هذا المقصد ويدعوان إلى هذا المدعى بأي لسان أمكن. Therefore you see Qur'an and Sunnah, they intend this issue of ma'rifatun nafs and call towards ma'rifatun nafs in every possible language. Different ways emphasize on ma'rifatun nafs, paying attention to your nafs, taking care of your nafs. If you remember in self-development, when we had a breakdown of spirituality, I said, in my understanding, we can summarize it in this way, that first, to become awake. Second, to know yourself. And then, take care of yourself, build yourself through aqaid, through amal, and through zikr and af'al, akhlaq. So Allama here then starts bringing some verses of the Qur'an and Hadith. Inshallah we can discuss this next week. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
بحمدك يا إلهي بدأت قولي وجئتك خاضعا.
So if any of the brothers and sisters have any questions, unmute or raise your hand and you can ask your questions.
Brother Mustafa, can I ask one? Sheikhna, thank you very much for this profound lesson today.
You're welcome.
Jazakallah khair. The question is, Sheikhna, will be again the age-old question of, how can somebody follow something if there's no bayyana, there's no hujjah on them? How do we reconcile? Because this question is asked by Shia, non-Shia, Muslim, non-Muslim. That, in this day and age, everything is available for people who want to access anything. How do you explain that situation where people can access the right message, but they do not have the inclination to do that because they are attached to dunya or they were never told about it?
Yeah, it is true that they can find the truth if they really look for it, if they had akhlaq of Salman Farsi, who was happy to leave his home and everything behind, searching for the truth. Yes, if they were like Salman, they could have found the truth, but Allah doesn't expect all people to be like Salman. What is important is that when they have available. Bayyana means clear. When there is enough evidence that even an ordinary person with in my understanding, with the level of search that they do in their life for other things, if they do the same level of search, for example, if someone wants to find a good job, a good university, if wants to marry, if you want to buy a house, how much they make efforts, how much they spend time inquiring. At least they should do this much about religion with open mind, open heart. But for example, to say that they should learn Arabic, for example, so that they can read early texts and then be able to interpret it by themselves, for example, so, or for example, someone is a Buddhist, has to study, for example, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, then different schools of Islam, all of them to find the truth. It's possible, but we don't say then this is bayyin for this person. So Allah knows who is really looking for the truth and who doesn't bother that much, who is against the truth. We cannot judge. Maybe in Allah's standards, many people, Allah still even today considers them as jahil qasir, especially because they have yaqeen, maybe about their own faith, maybe they see bad, for example, Muslims. I don't know, there can be excuses. We don't know, we cannot judge.
Thank you, Sheikh.
You're welcome, Ahsant.